I like pop music. I'm one of those guys who's like, oh, it's borderline unlistenable. I'm going to listen to Mariah Carey instead.
Welcome to 1001 Album Complaints, the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys who show their love through gentle but pointed mockery tell the backstory on the most influential albums of all time as chronicled in Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Now, if you don't know today's album super well or not at all, no worries. We'll guide you through it. We're going to play song clips while we dive into the whole story of this artist and this album. And along the way, we are going to be breaking these songs down musically and culturally to offer you both our praise and our nitpicky complaints as musicians. And at the end of all that, we're going to vote on whether this album is really a must-listen before you die. Now, if you are a returning listener, thank you and welcome back. But if you're new to the show, let me give you our standard disclaimer. We're musicians ourselves. We understand how difficult it is to make truly great art, and we come from a place of love and respect for the craft. But we also enjoy nitpicking and complaining, as the title of our show suggests. So we're not super fans, but honestly, even if we were, we'd still enjoy laughing about the way our favorite music got made. So, bottom line is we won't be treating this artist or this album with any particular reverence. Instead, we'll be talking some loving smack the way all musicians do in the van ride to the next gig when the radio plays literally any song ever created. But that said, we've also done our homework. We plan to give you a well-researched, if consistently irreverent, backstory of this band and this album along the way. And with that research under my belt, I'm confident our band tonight would completely understand and maybe even appreciate us poking at them and their various idiosyncrasies, because seriously, this is a wild one. My name's Rob. I'm a guitar player with decades of experience playing, writing, and recording music. I'm here tonight to walk you through the story of a band whose de facto Doc Brown, mad scientist bass player once said, "We were experts on music, but when it came to playing rock, we played like pigs."
Okay.
Sounds about right.
I'm, of course, talking about Cannes' Tago Mago, seminal work from this scene in Germany in the early 70s. To get us situated right quick into this music, let's play a snippet of the opening track from Tago Mago. It's called Paper House.
Everything what you want with your head. You agree, underwear, everywhere with your mind.
Okay, and with that out of the way, you got a taste of what we've been listening to, a very small taste, I assure you, and we are going to introduce our panel of complainers for the evening by way of an extra snarky, extra mean tweet-length review, and I am going to throw things first to Tom.
Thank you, Rob. My tweet-length review is worst Japanese and German team up ever. That's right, I said it.
Wow. Starting off strong. We are going to go next to Marty.
Thank you, Rob. I have an exceptionally dumb tweet-length review tonight, which will require another person, which is you, Rob.
I've been handed a script.
Right. This is how I imagine conversation with my friend in Cannes who made this album goes. All right, it's gonna go like this. Hey man, maybe have some vocal tracks that people can actually understand.
Hard pass. Mouth sounds only. Lyrics are stupid.
Okay. How about this? How about add a second drum beat? Maybe just one other drum beat.
That is redundant. There's only one correct beat and we found it.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. What about just a little mixing? Just a teeny tiny bit of mixing.
9. We record in castles. It's already mixed.
Okay, fine.
It's our first back and forth tweet. That's
I like that.
breaking new ground here, Marty.
First and last, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm still stung on the worst German Japanese team up ever. I'm thinking back to a few global events and wondering.
As longtime listeners of the show know, Tom is a student of history, if nothing else.
Right. And deeply snarky.
Let's go next to our very special guest who's going to get a proper introduction shortly, but welcome back to the show. Steven, give us your tweet length review.
Oh man, this was tough. I thought about things around, Tago Mago is what happens when a band mistakes not stopping for having ideas. And I also thought, since a lot of albums are journeys, this one feels more like a hostage situation. But because Tago Mago is the most gargantuan album in this book, I've gone the opposite direction. And I think I might have the shortest mean tweet in the show's history, maybe.
Ooh.
I'm sure there's someone who'll correct us. My tweet is, can't.
Yeah, there we go.
Very nice. Very succinct.
It's got to get close. It's got to get close to the shortest.
That's got to be very close. Yes.
I mean, that's 2 syllables.
Yeah.
2 syllables and 7 letters and a bit of punctuation. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
And this is Rob here, and I shall give you my tweet length review now. A spacious German castle, a howling Japanese hobo, and a level of smug satisfaction even Lou Reed has never tasted. On Tago Mago, Can thumps and yelps their way through an album best suited to a caveman orgy and proves that you, yes you, aren't as cool as you think.
Well,
Okay. Before we get too deep into this, tonight we have a very special guest. You've already heard his mellifluous voice all the way from Australia to help guide us through this perilously hip genre study, dare I say. It's returning guest, Stephen McNulty. Great to have you back, Stephen.
couldn't resist the invitation. It's an automatic.
And Stephen, of course, I want to get to your general impressions and everyone's general impressions very shortly, but I wanted to mention right at the top that Stephen here runs a record club called Shortcuts. Stephen, maybe tell us a little bit about that and tell us how the listeners can get in touch and maybe join.
Yeah, well, it started during the pandemic. I started a vinyl club out of my office here, and we just had our 5th anniversary a couple of months ago, and we got about 500 members here in Australia and New Zealand, and we just basically share some great records, have catch-ups every so often, things not too dissimilar to this, in effect. And yeah, it was kind of through someone in my club that I actually found you guys. So it's all interconnected.
Well, and of course, the link to learn more about the record club and to sign up is in the show notes right now. And, you know, I'll just say that the audience doesn't know this, but right before we started taping, Stephen, and it was like this the last time you came on, Stephen, you're showing us all these old, cool, vintage records. You got an amazing collection. We have brought you in tonight as a sort of ringer to help us through another particularly tough area for us Yanks, dare I say. And listeners might remember, Stephen, from coming on for the Pogues episode last year, where you really helped us navigate some of that history and culture. So we're hoping you can do the same despite not being German.
I don't think I can do either of those two things. Well, maybe got a few points of view that might help us along.
Stephen, my company is out of Australia, so I recognize that sunlight at 8 p.m. West Coast time.
Yeah, that's right. I'm shorts and t-shirt 10 months of the year.
Yeah, I heard it's been hot there this last week.
Pretty toasty. Yeah.
Let's get into some general impressions on the record. How was your week? Maybe let's start with Marty.
You know, this is a album I'm familiar with, and so it was great.
Shocker on that one.
It was great. It was great to revisit. And actually, you know, I feel like I liked it a little bit less this time around. I feel like I had a kind of a full arc with Can and ended up kind of getting more into their later stuff. And this to me just didn't really live up to what I remember it being. And it's mostly just because of like the production values. I think the tunes are memorable, though a little bit long. But I just feel like the production's really shoddy, and it really stuck out this time after, going through and listening to so many albums now. It just kind of sounds a little bit different this time around.
My first note is this is the Martiest album to ever Marty, so I'm not surprised that you're a fan of this one. But this doesn't hit on it doesn't check a lot of the boxes that I normally like checked in my music, but this album kind of kicks ass, I gotta say. There's like some definite weird experimentation and some grooves that I was not expecting here. I'd never listened to a moment of this band before, and I wasn't coming in with any preconceived notions, and I think it was different than I thought it was going to be, and I was somewhat pleasantly surprised. That being said, unfocused and long would be charitable ways to, describe these songs.
Yeah, it is a double album for anyone who may not have dived into the depths just yet. And that second album is pretty much entirely experimental noise. Steven, I'm going to throw the mic to you, though. Tell us some of your thoughts.
Yeah, well, within my club, there's a certain group who hold this album in very high esteem. And it was introduced to me through them. I find it kind of intoxicating. The drumming, the spidery guitar. You can't even call Damo Suzuki a singer, really. He's just a wild front man. The pretension, the silliness, everything is all there. But Marty, you're talking about the production. What you're talking about there is a band that had two-track tape devices and 5 microphones and managed to create that noise from 7 really fairly mediocre devices. And so therefore, this album is chock full of imperfections. You can hear the tape edits. You can hear when things go wrong. But I think the argument is, can an album so chock full of imperfections still be great? And I think that's one of the key discussions. And I think this is one of the key albums in this book, because this book is pretty safe in a lot of ways. But this is the opposite of safe. And so therefore, worthy of debate.
Yeah, let me say my piece. I'd heard of Can for a long time as being this great antecedent influence of bands I liked, but to my knowledge, I had not actually listened to them, or at least not for any length of time. And so I was coming in cold to this, and my immediate first listen notes were, it's Velvet Underground-esque, and it is undeniably cool music.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm coming in pretty positive on it. It is artsy-fartsy. It is indulgent. But it also feels far ahead of its time, and it most definitely has a vibe as well.
It feels German.
It feels German, and yet the longer I listened to it, the more I heard its echoes throughout the years, whether you're talking about Talking Heads or Television or Joy Division or even King Gizzard and some of their material that has this motoric beat.
Or Radiohead. I hear Radiohead a lot, especially in that second record with the weird beats and stuff.
Sure, you name it. When I sensed, especially after studying it, and this is one of those examples, I think, where the story is really important, because this is a high concept band, certainly. So we're going to get into that and talk about what they were trying to do.
Was one of the concepts, I don't write lyrics before the song starts. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
A terrible concept.
They very actively wanted to separate writing from creating. They almost had a no writing policy. So in that sense, it is kind of like college improv.
Yeah. I mean, I was in some pretty shitty jam bands in college, and I had definitely heard some echoes of some of our 27-minute failed experiments on stage where we tried to, jam from one song into another song, and you start throwing random aberrant notes out there, and maybe I just needed a guy with a tape machine to cut it up and throw in some random noises, and it would have been fucking, seminal or something.
Well, here's the other thing I will say for it. One, I found myself thinking that this is what I wished a lot of 60s American psych sounded like. Set the Velvet Underground aside for a moment. But I'm always going back to some of these 60s groups, and we've covered a couple of them on the show, and I'm always a little underwhelmed. This has that dark opium den in Marrakesh kind of feel that I like from the Velvet Underground, and they take it significantly further, I would say. It's like they took that one Velvet Underground track that's really strange, European Sun, or, there's always one per VU record, basically. And they made a whole band out of that, and then they went even further than that. So in that sense, I do think it sounds like an art gallery, and I'm not at all surprised that this would be a turnoff to the vast majority of people. So I'm commenting partially, Stephen, on what you said about the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die being relatively safe and not veering too far into the avant-garde and experimental. And in general, I would have to agree with you, but this feels like an exception. This is some real freak out the squares kind of shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got that whole ethos of if you lock on a groove and you play it long enough, the kind of wondering is, well, where will it take us? And the only limitation that I genuinely think they felt with a song like Hallelujah is it's got to fit on one side of vinyl. I suppose we should just finish it now.
Right.
And you kind of feel like that thing would just go on forever if they could.
Right. It gives it a sense of freedom for sure. There's definitely some sort of just spiritual freedom cutting through the whole album that is hard to capture when you have pre-written lyrics and parts.
Well, they were reacting to, it was called Schlagen, which was like the German music of the time, which was kind of cover versions of US and UK rock bands, and it was so safe. And they came out of the 40s and 50s in a pretty glum world and just decided to tear up the rules. But they genuinely did just say, all right, we're gonna sit in a room and play this for 20 hours and see what happens.
I want to play off what you said, Marty, as spiritual. There is a not coincidental reason that a lot of spiritual practice involves chanting and repetition endlessly. It puts you in a different state of mind. I think it does something physiologically to you that might be called a trance. And I do think that's what this music is at least seeking to do. And I think the musicians involved were feeling a good bit of that. And next, I want to comment a little bit, and I don't want to play my hand too ahead of schedule, but Tom talked about jamming unguidedly as a young person.
Yes.
I actually think the more I listened to this, the more I appreciated that this is not very easy to get to. Despite it sounding simple, it is deceptively complex to execute on something like this, in part because you have to have an almost delusional confidence in what you're doing and to stick with it.
I would say that, yes, if I produced this music and I, at the end of the day, heard this, I would not have the confidence to put this music out, certainly. There's no possible way, because it's full of mistakes. If you even want to call them mistakes, I'm sure that was like part of the process. That's what they were going for. There's a lot of imperfections. And honestly, to get back to what Marty said earlier, the production is dog shit. Like, it doesn't sound good a lot of the time. And for the people out there that have never been in a recording studio, this is the product in a lot of ways of them not recording anything in isolation. So if the bassist fucks up, either you scrap the whole track or that just stays on the track. Or if there are times where I want more bass in the mix, but because they're doing this jam and the bass player is kind of not knowing exactly what he wants to play, he starts playing a little softer. It's just natural when you're jamming. If you don't really know what you're playing, you kind of play a little softer, and he just disappears in the mix. And there's nothing that they could do about that after the fact. It's just like, that's just what it was.
And Stephen alluded to it, and I'm going to, based on the biography of Can that I read called All Gates Open, I believe this was recorded with 3 microphones. One pointed at or for the drums, so to speak, but that's, in most modern recording studios, you're talking about 8 or more mics on the drums. One for the singer, whatever the hell that means, because half the time he feels like he's pretty far off the mic, and just one sitting right in the middle of the room of all these guys. And on top of that, they did not have another guy called a mixing engineer or anyone to help them run the equipment. They were doing this as the players only. And so they spent a fair amount of time dialing in just where they were standing, where their amps were, to get to what we got. But yeah, I mean, I would have to agree that it sounds muddy is an underestimation of how it sounds, right? It's very raw.
It sounds amateurish.
Yeah, that said, I will give them some credit for, it was very easy for me to picture myself in the room. Like, yeah, it's dated from a production and sonic level for sure, but the live energy came across, despite the fact that Stephen also mentioned that they do have a tendency to edit long takes together, and that was one of their ways to get around what we might call mistakes or find the parts of songs they wanted to use. There's a couple more things I want to bring up before we get into the background that I think are kind of important context. One is, this maybe surprisingly made me think about a connection not just with the VU in America and New York, but also with the Grateful Dead in San Francisco. And what I mean by that is they don't sound like the Grateful Dead. But what I mean is I'm talking about the Dead playing those early acid test shows where the line between the audience and the band, or what is a song, or what even counts, or how long should it go on, is completely and purposefully blurred. And I would argue, I think this is where the Velvet Underground came out of that same kind of scene, playing shows at the factory, but really they weren't intended, at least in my understanding, to be the focus of the entertainment. They were just sort of a part of the atmosphere, right? And I think this is a big part of what Can is also going for.
But also what you're talking about there for both of those situations is somewhat a product of, I don't have enough written material to fill out this 4-hour party. And so therefore I'm just going to stretch and stretch and stretch. And some of this stuff felt like they were stretching.
But also maybe that's not their mindset at all.
No, I think it was more academic than that. I mean, what you've got are the students of Stockhausen, people who love John Cage. Erwin Schmidt and Holger Schuke went to New York. I mean, they could well have been in that scene in the late 60s. And they came back with those ideas that music can be more of an alchemy than a design. And so it really was, I think, absolutely part of what they thought. But the key to it, which we haven't mentioned yet, is we often talk about the rhythm section. I think Holger Schuke is not a great bass player, but Yaki Liebezeit is an unbelievable drummer. And so what you've got there is that's what they lock around.
I think the drums are a standout for sure.
He's amazing, yeah.
Incredibly funky, but not funky in a Clyde Stubblefield kind of Stax and Motown James Brown way, which is all about, swing and groove. It's about propulsion. So you got a song like Oh Yeah, or you got a song like Hallelujah, and it is propelled by that drum beat and his in small changes in the texture in this. For me, I haven't listened to this album for many times over many years. Every time I listen to some of these songs, they sound different. I can never predict where Hallelujah is going to go, even though I've listened to it 100 times. I have no idea. It's weird. It's a certain alchemy that type of music can produce that you don't really get from most rock and roll.
I would say when the drums definitely lock in confidently on something, that is where I think that they shine in terms of sounding like a song. But there's a lot of times where I don't even think they're trying to sound like a song. They're just trying to sound like sounds coming at you. And the one thing I noticed there is that the drums are very deceptively busy. They're not overwhelming. He's not doing a bunch of crazy stuff, but there's a ton of just really little things that he is doing constantly. And it's got to be, they're talking about doing these for 16-hour recording days. It's got to be exhausting. Just a marathon session of that stuff, because he's never standing still. His wrists must be moving constantly.
Oh, he must have forearms like Popeye. I mean, I can't imagine. How could it be? He's just a machine.
He is a machine.
Everyone in the band knew that he was different mustard compared to...
He has, when you said, Stephen, funky, that's kind of my take on Jackie's drumming is that it's almost like this tribal push, something about it. It's very Stone Age or something.
Well, Eno took a lot of these kind of world rhythms and went with David Byrne to make, some records. I just saw David Byrne in concert couple of nights ago, and that concert went right into my top 5 concerts of all time.
Tom and I saw him a couple of weeks ago on the same tour.
Oh my God,
it was rad.
Holy God, spectacular.
So good.
And there's four drummers running around that stage creating, the kind of sounds that a Yaki Liebezeit would have been all over. I completely was sat there going, I can hear Yaki Liebezeit in what that band is doing on stage right now. And I think that's where this band has an anchor point where you can say, that's pretty special.
That's why they gave him 1/3 of the microphones. There you go.
Yeah. They had to. But the second record, he's kind of invisible, like you said, because it is sound collage, and Shuke was just splicing together noise from the studio, and it was deliberately designed to be something to throw you off. But he just had that first record on its own. Those first 4 songs, and man, they're some of the funkiest rock songs ever written, I think.
Indeed. So we're going to get into the background shortly, but there's just one other thing I wanted to mention before we do, which is to tackle the term krautrock, which this is often filed under. And I'm going to blow your mind here. It has racist origins, guys. So this artsy movement happening in West Germany that we're going to be talking about that came out of in the late 60s and early 70s was called several different things by journalists while it was happening. Kind of standard for any music scene. It was called cosmic music. That's sort of the English translation of what a lot of Germans were calling it at the time, which might be a little more akin to something like space rock, but direct translation would be cosmic music. Unsurprisingly now, various artists in the scene did not want to be blanketed with any term in particular. And krautrock, the term, was actually coined by a British critic who intended it originally as diminutive because kraut was a popular slur for Germans coming out of the 2 world wars in Europe. However, then something interesting happened, which is the music started becoming popular in the UK. The term kind of stuck. The German bands, in as much as they hated any label for what they were doing, ultimately more or less embraced or at least accepted it. So it's weirdly has become the de facto term that people will use.
It's like butt rock. Or like
Yeah, and maybe it's worth mentioning that also kraut in German can also refer to herbs or specifically drugs like weed. So they might be thinking in their head, well, it kind of could be that as well.
It was funny because probably the greatest krautrock band, the psychedelic side of things anyway, alongside Can and Kraftwerk, was Faust. And on their 4th album, they called the first song on their album krautrock, and they deliberately made it 12 minutes of noise. Like, that's all it is, just 12 minutes of noise. And it was, at the time, it was like just poking these British journalists in the eye, saying, yeah, don't label us, because, you know, we'll take the piss out of you back. And there is a kind of, even though it's pretentious and silly, there is a weird sense of humor that kind of permeates through a lot of krautrock.
Yeah. Germans are known for their senses of humor, right? That's what they're famous for.
It's true. So now it's time to get into the background of this band and this record and this scene. But before we do, we're going to take a short break. And we are back. So to get into the background of Can's Tago Mago, this is a story about a time and place that's as yet unexplored by us here on the show, so I'm excited to get into it. And some aspects of the overall mindset should be familiar, I can say. So picture this. Band formed by baby boomers in post-war West Germany. These are young people who are born into rubble and destruction and chaos, and they grow up not really knowing the details of Germany's sordid, very recent history until they start coming of age in the mid-60s, at which point they are, of course, horrified. And not only that, they're coming of age in the later 60s and wanting to actively defy a society that allowed many should-be war criminals, or at least highly complicit citizens, to disappear into this fast-growing bureaucracy of nation rebuilding without facing any real consequences. And lastly, I want to point out that at this time, Germany is an occupied country. It's not subtle. The country is divided. It's chopped in half by 2 outside powers, the USSR in the east and the US, effectively, in the west. And our story takes place in the west, where young German musicians are feeling not just occupied by American troops in their cities, but overwhelmed by US and UK artistic culture flooding in the mid to late 60s. So they want to reinvent everything. Broadly speaking, this is the German equivalent of the 60s counterculture movement in the United States. And indeed, some of the ingredients are the same. You have a conservative government trying to hold a fragile society together with a generation desperately trying to shake off the past. But you combine that with these cities in literal rubble and these guys' earliest childhood memories of air raids. And you have this culture that is at an almost complete restart after a completely devastating war. So because of this, young people throughout Germany are thinking about trying to reestablish a sense of cultural pride, to not have the Nazi regime be the only thing Germany is known for, to start again, to make a different kind of stamp on the world. I thought that in of itself was just an interesting context that I had never quite pictured, the sort of teenagers coming out of World War II in Germany.
Yeah, they had to have been pretty bitter because they're like living in a world where, number one, they're occupied, and number two, like, I imagine the economy was absolute dog shit, right? Like, all of their factories and everything had been destroyed.
And I think there's other European cities that kind of had a similar amount of destruction. I always think about like The Wall and the kind of post-war England kind of vibes that you get from some of those Pink Floyd albums, though there's not the attachment to a Holocaust, which probably makes maybe a little bit of shame mixed in there.
Yeah, literal Nazis, yes.
Well, there's a couple of things. You know, Holger Schuke, who's kind of like the genius behind the band, he was from Danzig, which was at the time, before the war, known as a free city. He was effectively stateless, but then he was taken over by the Nazis, and they had to change his name. And he only changed his name back to Shuke when he joined Can. And Erwin Schmidt, who's the kind of completely mad scientist keyboardist, he got expelled from college because he had a little side gig, which I think is one of the coolest side gigs I've ever heard. He got expelled because he kept exposing staff members as being Nazis. You're completely right, Rob. These were reactionaries in every way they possibly could.
Absolutely. So out of all that grows Can, a group of musicians saying, let's just play. Let's not write, let's play. And by the way, let's record literally everything. The band has no leader, no hierarchy. That is important. That itself is a political statement. They are, for the most part, classically trained musicians trying to make something brand new. And to do it, they seek to boil rock and roll down back to its essence, right? So, as I said, the band has no official leader, but for this week, for research purposes, I read what is considered by many on the internet the definitive Can biography. It's called All Gates Open, and it is co-authored by keyboardist Erwin Schmidt. So let's start with him. He is born in Berlin in 1937. So like I said, his earliest memories as a toddler are of his city getting bombed by American planes. As the war comes to a close, he studies piano, he studies a few other instruments like French horn, and as a teenager, he's good enough that he's playing in a traveling orchestra around Germany. This continues. He's on this path for quite a while. He studies at a prestigious school in Austria, and for a while he's on his way to becoming a professional classical musician. He gets jobs conducting local orchestras. He's composing in his spare time for small films, local documentary pieces getting made by artsy types, and eventually he makes his way to Cologne, a city in Germany, for more modern compositional music study with a very modern German composer called Stockhausen. Now, we don't have time to get too deep into this dude Stockhausen, but he is an important figure in early electronic music composition. Some have called him the father of electronic music. And he's also a part of this movement that predates him a bit, but he's an important part of it, called Musique Concrète, which was a movement started in the 40s in France, an attempt to break all the old rules of classical music composition, and in particular started them using non-traditional instruments to make sound or manipulating recorded sound so thoroughly as to disguise what it even was, that kind of stuff. I believe approximately the same school of thought as like an Edgar Varese, who we talked about in the Frank Zappa episode. You know, it's very, very avant-garde modern.
The real bad boys of classical you're talking about. Yeah.
The real bad boys, yeah. Indeed. The real unlistenable shit. So the point is, Erwin's very interested in modern composition. He studies under some real avant-garde types, but a big turning point for him, Stephen mentioned it, comes when he takes a professional trip to New York City around 1966. While there, he watches Andy Warhol films. He takes in this burgeoning avant-garde scene. He meets and performs with a bunch of people, including a guy called Terry Riley, who's known for being an early experimenter of composition with tape loops. He's very, very much inspired by everything that is going on there. So, 1967, he's back in Germany. He calls up a fellow composer, Holger Schuke, also a student of this avant-garde guy, Stockhausen, and he suggests that Holger move to Cologne to start a band with him. Now, Holger's origins, Stephen already alluded to it, they're a little murkier, but he's sort of a mad scientist of what would become Can. I think if there was going to be a leader that we would assign leadership to, it's probably him, even though Schmidt got the band together. But like Stephen said, he was born in Danzig, which is a port city that's historically and geographically in Poland, but also operated as a free city / autonomous zone for a period and then was under Nazi control. And again, like Stephen mentioned, Holger's born in 1938. His parents see the way the wind is blowing with their Polish last name, and so they purposely obscure their family origins, take a more Germanic sounding name, even fake a bunch of genealogy documents to get by as Aryan during that time. Now, Holger's thing when he's a kid, perhaps unsurprisingly, is a fascination with electronics, taking apart radios, especially these early radios that they were calling 3D, because what that meant was they had a speaker on the front and two speakers on the side, and that was giving a three-dimensionality to it. So he was really into that. He is credited in the band not only with bass, but with editing and engineering. But speaking of the musical part, he studied piano from a young age. He gigged significantly as an upright bass player in jazz bands and orchestras before Can. And it's that gigging that leads him to move from Danzig to Berlin in the early 60s and eventually meet guys like Erwin, who invites him to move to Cologne. And again, to give a little context to what's going on in the world, 1962 is when the Berlin Wall goes up. So it's very strange times, right? Cologne at that time, which is a more westerly city, is considered a more liberal, artsy place. So back to Holger and his move to Cologne to form a band. He brings a guy he knows called Michael Caroli, who's his music student and is 10 years younger than either of the other two guys. And he ends up being the guitar player in this band, but he grew up playing violin. Then he played banjo, which he apparently taught himself. And he played in a school band called the Steamboat Jazz Pirates, which now I want to hear that band.
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. Prominent banjo in that band.
He does play violin in some later Can albums, and every time I hear him play, I'm thinking, God, I wish he'd have played it more because it sounds awesome. It's yeah.
These guys have a lot of talents, and so it's almost interesting that they took such a reserved approach to what we're hearing in a way. But okay, at 15, this guy Michael gets his first electric guitar. It's the early 60s, rock and roll is happening. And like I said, he's 10 years younger than Ermin and Holger, and so he's into the Beatles. He's the one that's kind of bringing this rock influence to these other guys, because keep in mind, at this point in the 60s, the vast majority of classical musicians or anyone that thought of themselves as a quote-unquote real artist was of the opinion that pop music could never have any real artistic value, right? And we've talked before about, let's say, the Velvet Underground in New York and how that was starting to shift, but it was just starting. This idea that people from the art world, the high art world, so to speak, like visual art and maybe classical, were starting to get interested in, how can we mix with this so-called low art of pop music? So Michael Caroli is helping to change Holger and Ermin's minds in the now late 60s that they're together in Cologne forming this band. He's turning them on to all these major rock records. We all know the ones, Sgt. Pepper, Jimi Hendrix, and it's having an influence, right? Now we got 3 of the founding members together. We got Ermin on keyboards, Michael on guitar, Holger is going to play bass. They all bang on other things at various times, but it's easier just to think of them in the most standard positions here. And Ermin, he's a smart guy. He knows he needs at least one more member in the group, a drummer. So he calls up a free jazz drummer who's been gigging around town and asks him for a recommendation of a more straightforward jazz-trained drummer. He's like, look, dude, I fucking hate free jazz. So definitely none of that. And over the phone, free jazz guy's like, yeah, I know someone. But flash forward to the audition, he just shows up himself. It's like, surprise, I'm here.
Not a lot of other gigs as the free jazz drummer. His calendar's pretty empty.
Initially, there is disappointment because Ermin, as we said, fucking can't stand free jazz. And look, if there's anything that we can come to agreement on tonight, boys, it is that. But this drummer, a guy called Yaki, agrees too. And since that phone call, apparently, he has decided that he too hates free jazz. So he quits his band. And why, you might ask? Turns out free jazz ain't free, baby. There's a bunch of dumb rules about what you can and can't do. And Yaki's been listening to Indian music and Arabic music and getting intrigued by what he calls pulse rhythms, which he says were forbidden by his free jazz brethren.
Yeah, I don't think of free jazz as having a lot of beat behind it. Just a lot of, drum rolls everywhere.
Yeah, we're joking about it, but that is an interesting thing and a truism of everything in life where you label a genre free jazz like, yeah, do whatever you want. No, don't do that, though. Like, definitely don't do that. That's not the style.
Yeah, don't lock around the groove. You can clearly hear what Yaki's into.
God damn it, people are dancing at our shows. This is unacceptable. They need to stand there looking confused.
Yeah, exactly.
Next thing you know, women might show up. So Yaki's background is that he studied trumpet as a kid, switched over to drums in a school band out of necessity, and was having a career as a drummer already. He was touring around. He was backing up some fairly major dudes like Chet Baker for a while. But he's like, I'm over it. Free jazz is in the past. I'm ready to make a different kind of music people will say they like to sound hip, but actually think is completely unlistenable. These 4 guys, they meet, they play together for the first time, making what they themselves describe as noise. Their words. But based on that, everyone instantly agrees that they should dedicate themselves to this new and nameless band. They do not know what the band is going to become, and they all agree that it does not sound good. I want to emphasize
That's just like a level of confidence that I've been in bands that have sounded good, and I didn't have the confidence to fully dedicate myself to that. But they're like,
it's wild that they all have these backgrounds too that are very musical. That they're like, we got together and it sounded like shit.
But here's the thing, right? It is kind of rare to hear virtuoso musicians decide not to be virtuoso. Like it's weird. Like, how did they get there?
I wonder if at any practices they just started like ripping on like some like prog rock song or something like that just out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, check this out. You know, like doing something like super locked in and complicated.
Like, hey, don't ever do that again.
All right, we're just fucking around. We're fucking around. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
You know the rules. You know the rules.
In that room, in that castle, I kind of think it would be academic. I think it would be quiet. I think it would be thoughtful. I think they would be studious. That's the sense I get of it. I don't get of it as being wild. And, you know, you get Damo Suzuki out there being, you know, we'll come to him. But I think they're very, you know, I don't know if there's what the phrase is in the US, but when someone's overly studious, they kind of get that kind of boring kind of. I think there's something about that in there.
You're saying Germans might be a little straight-laced?
Yeah. Yeah, on this week's episode of Is It Punk? No.
I can imagine it not being wild in any way.
The music is definitely not, it's not selfish. Rob talking about how there's pretty like a flat organization with no real hierarchy. You can hear it in the music where there's no one being super virtuosic and stealing the show like you would get on like a lot of prog rock albums where everyone's just jerking off the whole time. You know, it's really, yeah, you can tell they're listening to each other.
That still stands out as different and interesting to me all these years later. And I do think that they really formed quickly around this ethos that you're talking about, which is the virtue of anti-virtuosity, so to speak, right? So the first thing they do is they make a film score together that Ehrman gets hired for.
Of course.
Through his existing context. Something...
I'm sure it was for a rom-com, right? Just something super lighthearted.
Well, actually, Tom, it was somewhere between a political statement and a softcore porn, apparently.
Oh, okay.
I was about to say it'd be new. It would have to be. There'd be a lot of that going on.
But more importantly, in these extremely early days, they get an exceedingly interesting offer from an acquaintance there in Cologne. A dude they know. This can only happen in Germany, by the way. A dude they know has got a empty, mostly unrestored castle they can live in, rent-free, for at least a year. Now, this guy's eventual goal is to turn it into an art space kind of place. I guess he figures having a house band will be a good start. So they all move in to this big stone castle. They put mattresses against the walls to dampen the sound. They hold their practices in this huge entrance hall, and they dub this place Inner Space.
And there's no drugs going on here? These guys, yeah.
Yeah, I was waiting for that part.
I'm pretty sure there were, but they really didn't talk about it much in this book I read. They did mention that they had experimented with LSD a bit, but I didn't get the sense that drugs and partying were like a big part, kind of like Steven said, of their practices or shows necessarily. I do think they were influenced by psychedelics, almost certainly, but yeah, a little more straight-laced when it came to doing the job of music.
I mean, this album on its face reads acid burnout, like from beginning to end, basically.
Yeah. Well, Damo might be a slightly different case.
I think he is. I think he's a different fish. I think we'll get on to him.
We're going to get to him shortly. Definitely an odd bird. So, as I mentioned, part of their whole vibe is recording everything. So right away, they set up 2 mics, some speakers. They have at it. There's no writing. It's like college improv. Don't dare come in with an idea. All right. But according to them, it was not an improvisation. Holger called it instant composition. He said it's like a football team. You know the goal, but you don't know at any moment where the ball is going. And what you get out of that is what he called permanent surprise.
Do you know if they have some sort of like guaranteed minimum wage or something like that at the time where
no, yeah, living on the dole?
No, I think they were all pretty broke, and my impression is in these early years the only money was coming in from Ehrman's contacts, because he was like in his 30s at this point, and he was making a decent living scoring these films and other little like tidbits like that. I think that's where the money was coming from. Of course, they had free rent, as I just described.
It's wild because he's the one that's like still alive.
Yeah,
and also they didn't play many live shows. I mean, in those early years, they only played like 15, 20 live shows, so they didn't have that much coming in. It was like they said, that Inner Space was where they were. Really, we really only became a killer live band, probably around this time. But back then, they didn't even really play live very much.
Yeah, well, since you mentioned them playing live, a few months into them living at this castle, the owner's like, let's start staging some parties with you guys as entertainment. I'm going to use that in quotes. The band plays and bangs on anything and everything at hand. Pans, bottles, radiators, everything's fair game. And I read an anecdote that one night Ehrman was playing the piano strings, like inside the piano, with an electric razor. And Holger would just be shrieking for minutes on end. Keep in mind, they don't have a vocalist at this point. But that all culminates one night in them impromptu deciding to destroy an entire grand piano, just smash the shit out of it.
So it's like 85-15 girls to guys at these parties, I imagine.
Wow.
The last piece of the Can founding puzzle is a guy called Malcolm Mooney, an American who had been backpacking around the world for a year or so to avoid the draft for Vietnam, somehow ends up getting invited to the castle. Now, he was a painter, he was a sculptor, he was a saxophone player, so naturally when they meet him, they push him to the center of the room and insist he improvise vocals on top of their stony jams. To the best of my understanding, Malcolm the Backpacker, who's also 10 years younger than a couple of the other guys. So you have some guys in their mid-30s and you have some guys in their early 20s in this group. But he basically shows up at the rehearsal. They conscript him into being a vocalist without any prep whatsoever. They hit the record button. And what follows, and I mean directly follows, is 7 minutes of driving rhythm and nonsense chanting and lots of atonal guitar stuff. And this completely unplanned take becomes the first song on their first album. This is the kind of band we're dealing with here, right? The album is called Monster Movie, which is a badass album title. No complaints there.
It is. I just assumed that was the movie score that you were talking about for a movie called Monster Movie. All right.
And the song is called Father Cannot Yell, which is also a great title. These guys all say Malcolm gave them a rhythmic push and helped them lock into the so-called motoric beat that they are known for and that we've partially been talking about, that somehow the drummer was cueing off of the singer, this is in his words, and that was driving the pulse forward. And I think this is a good time to talk about that so-called motoric beat for a minute. This was a term coined by journalists as well about Yaki from Can's drumming style specifically. And in German, it just means motor skill. But now generally it refers to this almost primitively simple, relentless 4/4 driving beat that characterizes this band and other related space rock / krautrock to follow. The idea is simple. It propels you forward endlessly. Mo Tucker from VU's drumming style has been very charitably called proto-motoric.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think this is a big part of, you can hear this in bands like Joy Division, in bands like Yo La Tengo, Stereolab, and on some of the King Gizzard stuff like Nonagon Infinity or I'm in Your Mind Fuzz. It's definitely calling back to this motoric beat. Now, with Backpacker Malcolm as a vocalist, we have our founding band. They are broke, but they do get some occasional income through the local film scene, setting their music to softcore porn films, etc. Now, eventually it dawns on them that in order to make money, they should probably give a name to their jazz art noise collective machine and maybe play some non-castle gigs. So they bandy some different stuff around, including the name of their practice or performance space called Inner Space. They felt that was a little too hippie-ish for them, and they land on Can. Actually, I should say on the first album, they are billed as The Can, and they later drop the. But in any case, they liked the simplicity of the word. They liked that it had multiple meanings. The specific ones I heard mentioned in this book were that it also meant ass in American slang, as well as can do, as well as it being a subtle reference, or perhaps not so subtle, to Andy Warhol's Campbell soup cans, which were a modern example of this high culture, low culture mix that we're talking about.
Is there anything to them adopting kind of like the English language rather than their German languages?
It's a good question. I assume it was, I didn't read about this specifically, but I'm going to guess that it was influenced by this guy Malcolm, because I don't think he spoke German.
He's American. That's right. Yeah.
An African American, in fact, which was very unusual in Germany at that time. In fact, most other krautrock bands were very German. Can were very different in that respect.
Yeah, I thought maybe they were doing English because better marketing. They want to get that play on American radio stations.
So they're still messing around, trying to figure out who they want to be as a band. They haven't made any official records yet or anything like that. In 1968, the group all together as a band outing goes to see Hendrix play Cologne. And this really helps solidify their move towards a rockier version of avant-garde music. So they've been playing more and more to small audiences. They've been recording. They compiled these various recordings. They become the official first album called Monster Movie. I'm going to blow your mind. They weren't getting any major label interest at this time. But someone from the artsy German community with connections to a small label agrees to print like 500 copies of this thing. So that kind of gets them started.
It's amazing how the breadth of Jimi Hendrix's touch in every single band from this era. It's just amazing.
Well, I think, and this is something that might get either laughed off or just kind of gets forgotten. But I think a lot of Jimi Hendrix, and I suspect especially Jimi Hendrix Live, was more avant-garde and weird than you might be thinking. Like in the collective memory, he tends to be thought of as a very bluesy guitar player, and he absolutely is. But he was making a lot of noise with that electric guitar and doing some pretty wild atonal stuff, and that's before you get to the performance antics and things like that. Okay. At some point during this period, vocalist Malcolm Mooney is deteriorating mentally and is advised by a therapist to leave the chaos of this group entirely. Now, I read an anecdote where Malcolm talks about being really out of it, mentally confused, and one day he just rides the train to the end of the line in the city, and then he gets out, and then he just starts working with the road crew to cobble the road they're working on. I also heard an anecdote where one time Can played an art gallery, and Malcolm thought it would be funny to pose as the curator and sell off a bunch of the art to attendees at rock bottom prices. And they eventually caught him, and all the art and the money got returned. I saw it reported in some places that he was pushed out of the band after this incident. Can's bio that I read, again, written or co-written by Ermin Schmidt. Ermin Schmidt says that event did happen, but he does not cite it as a cause of Malcolm leaving.
Does he say that Malcolm left, or does he say that he was fired?
He says the part about mental deterioration.
Okay. So he just spiraled out and left, not spiraled out and they got fired.
According to Ermin Schmidt, who is sort of the definitive biographer, but I heard some different things reported. In any case, Malcolm does leave the group, and for a time, Can is left without a vocalist. But how will people know which part to sing along to? You may be wondering. And this brings us to our favorite segment on the show. It's Can's Tago Mago by the numbers.
Oh, my goodness.
Nicely done.
First number I want to throw out to you is 12, as in a reported 12 hours on a single riff that the band jammed at a rehearsal / recording session with Malcolm.
And again, no drugs. No drugs at all, huh?
Apparently not. The eventual output of that was a 20-minute song called You Do Right, with do spelled like doo-doo, that takes up the entirety of side 2 of their first album, Monster Movie. Next number I want to tell you about is 3, as in 3 full hours of vocalist Malcolm Mooney shouting the words upstairs, downstairs. Now, this began as an improv during one of the band's shows, but reportedly continued well after the music had stopped.
This just sounds fucking insufferable to be around. I gotta be honest. If I was hanging out with these guys, I'd be like, you guys are fucking douchebags and I'm leaving. Jesus Christ.
Now look, full disclosure, this anecdote may not be completely accurate. It's been widely retold that way, but I searched for concrete evidence, including in the book I'm reading. I didn't find it. Malcolm was most definitely known for getting into repeating loops of phrases during these long, stony jams. Instant compositions. And this is part of why I think, or it is thought, that he suffered a mental breakdown and left the group. But who needs him? There's more nutty travelers out there, which brings us to our next number, 21, as in the number of households around Sweden that responded to future Tago Mago vocalist Damo Suzuki's classified ad that he placed in a Swedish newspaper around 1967 that simply said he was a Japanese teenager interested in learning about Swedish culture and can I come stay with you for a month.
Damn, 21 people. And none of them planned to sell him into slavery or anything like that? Like
different times. And by the way, you know how he got from Japan to Sweden? He took the fucking Trans-Siberian Railroad.
Oh, that's awesome. I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Next number I want to throw out to you is 10, as in the revised out of 10 score that Pitchfork gave Tago Mago for its 40th anniversary. They also called it the 29th best album of the 1970s. It's safe to say this album has garnered much praise for influencing all the hit bands basically of the next 5 decades. We've mentioned many of them. Radiohead certainly on that list. Steven mentioned bands like Flaming Lips. You name it, have been influenced by Can. And before I get back to our story, I just want to say thank you for listening to us. We love doing this show every week. We love diving in, learning about different aspects of bands we either do or do not know, music history, different cultures. It's so fun, and we continue doing it because of you. We love the energy and the mailbag entries you give us and all the comments you leave on our Patreon thread that is available right now for free. So thank you. Okay, now back to our story. Can is without a vocalist. So they audition various singers, but end up rejecting them for being either too nice or too nice sounding.
Hate that.
Eventually, they meet a busker named Damo Suzuki, a Japanese guy, and he joins the group. Now, Damo has been busking his way around Europe for the last couple years, and he said he'd grown tired of playing the same stuff, unclear what that same stuff was, on the street every day. So he just started turning his busking into more like performance art and just mumbling and screaming at people. When Can met him, they hired him on the spot, not because he could sing, but because A, he was screaming on the street, and they were like, this is our guy. And B, and Steven, you hinted at it with their last vocalist, but seeing Asian people in Europe was so rare at the time that aspect, what they called Damo's alienness, would really help freak people out.
So, like, we got this schizophrenic Japanese guy. It's fucking straight to the top for us. This is just a tried and true method.
When Michael Mooney came to Inner Space and he had a saxophone and they said, stand in the middle of the room and sing along to this and we'll record it. With Damo, what they did was they had a concert that night. They met him and they said, will you come and play with us? And so his first concert was with them that night. Out of the frying pan into the fire. They didn't hang around.
Yes, correct. You are accurate. It was not, do you want to come audition for our band, or even do you want to join our band? It was, do you want to sing for us at our show tonight? There will be no rehearsal. There sure is shared on any songs to learn. You'll be great. And supposedly that night, of a theater of initially 1,500 people there to see them, only 30 remained at the end of the night, based, they said, on Damo's performance or perhaps just what he drew out of the band. But to Can, that was instantly perfect. They had their guy.
They were like, oh, he chased away better than 1,000 people. This is our guy. That's what they're going for.
Correct.
How is this band successful?
And apparently there were quite a few Americans who were the stragglers to the end, who were just so bemused by the whole thing that they just were kind of like staring at the crash, you know.
We are a morbid people.
And, you know, that said, we've been talking about, you know, Damo does come off as kind of nuts, but he did grow up playing flute and sax and guitar. And the reason he came to Germany in the first place, I mean, yes, he was busking around, but specifically how he entered Germany was with an early touring production of hippie musical Hair, which is part of why he had long hair. And apparently that production included a young Donna Summer.
Oh, wow.
But okay, finally, Can is ready for a breakthrough. You can tell, right? A friend sets up a performance at a popular club on a Saturday night where none other than Oscar-winning actor from Hollywood's golden era, David Niven, will be in attendance. I'm sure you all know who he is and have his autograph on in your book. Very posh. Mustaches are being twiddled. Cummerbunds are being worn. So what do you think Can do in this situation? This is like a setup for a Three Stooges gag. First of all, they hate this club, and particularly in their minds, anyone who would dare go there on a Saturday night must be a tourist. So they show up. Erman, the organ player, pulls a brick off the street, just lays it on the keys of the organ. Michael, the guitar player, turns the guitar on full blast, leans the guitar against the amp, never touches it again. Holger, the bass player, occasionally smacks the bass, actually, and lays on the floor, but the three of them basically make performance art out of shoveling cake into their mouth for an extended period of time. Now, Yaki actually plays the drums, and Damo just screams like he's being tortured.
I gotta tell you, I fucking hate these guys. Like,
Does that not remind you of the last Chop concert?
No, yeah, you know, that Rob's feeding me the cake in those. It's very erotic, yeah.
It's similar in that the band reported, we succeeded in making most people leave.
A lot of parallels.
This could be apocryphal, but David Niven, when asked what he thought about the music of the evening, reportedly said, it was great, but I didn't know it was music. I think that sums it up. Their second official release is just called Soundtracks, because it's a collection of stuff they recorded for 5 or more movie soundtracks over this period. That one has some stuff with Damo, some stuff with Malcolm on it. And side note, I just thought this was more fuel for the fire. Holger makes a point of saying in this biography that the only person who ever even saw the films that the band was composing for was Erman. He follows that up by saying, Ehrman would just tell us what it was about. We simply made music, and guess what? It always fit.
Oh, yeah. Sure, it fit like a glove. Just this like creeping existential dread underneath the softcore porn scene. It's great.
And now we're finally ready to approach Tago Mago, their proper second album, the first release where they are billed simply as Can, without the, and in their minds at the time, the concept of the band had now really come together after years of experimentation and fucking around. They're done with that part. And this is Can buckling down to write songs. Joking aside, as they enter the recording studio, in their minds, this represents the first true statement of what they think the band can be. And unlike previous releases that were compiled from takes and from various times, this is a very purposeful album effort, right? So the name Tago Mago comes from a small island near Ibiza, Spain, originally named for a Carthaginian general Hannibal's brother, Mago. The name means Mago Rock, interestingly enough. Now, it's a privately owned resort island that Yaki had visited when he was playing with Chet Baker in the early 60s, who for a period rented a home there in the throes of an opium addiction. Of course, as we've been talking about, this was recorded at the castle where they practiced, lived, partied. They worked on it for about 3 months. This is the end of 1970, beginning of 1971. And, you know, we said it, but some of these are these long improvisational tracks where they just decide on endpoints. Some are edited or spliced together by Holger, the bass player, after the fact to make them into what, in his words, would be a cohesive song.
Yeah, mission accomplished. Yeah.
Maybe I should repeat that. A lot of editing and post-production work went into making these quote-unquote cohesive songs.
Yeah. I didn't listen to anything else from their catalog, but if this is them, like if this is the pop version of Can, I don't know what the fuck else they could possibly be doing.
It's not. No, the next album is more commercial, and the next one after that's kind of electronic and maybe not quite poppy, but kind of.
Okay.
The first two are pretty difficult listens. This is the cusp of them kind of figuring out a little bit of commerciality, but also still being wild enough and different enough. They got on a slippery slope of being less interesting.
I feel like the one song everyone knows by Can is that song Vitamin C, which I think comes from the album after this.
Which is on the next album, which gives you an idea of how, you know, that is a song that could be the soundtrack to just about any cool movie you can ever think of.
Also on the list, so we will be listening to it at some point in this Baton Death March that we've engaged in.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yay.
It's got a few familiar sounding drum beats.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, this is a 3-microphone project recorded on a suitcase-style reel-to-reel called a Revox A77. I think more than likely it's 2 of those machines because, like Steven said earlier, we're talking about 2 tracks only per reel, and which begs the question why they didn't use 4. But I got this from Ermin Schmidt's bio.
I bet you that they couldn't quantize them to make them both, to make the tapes like be at the same time. So they had to take 2 tracks and bounce it down to one of the tracks on the other 2 track. And then they had 1 remaining track to work with.
And they would re-record on top of it. So they'd play it back, what was on the one track, re-record. And that was how they overdub.
And sometimes play it backwards, as we hear on this record.
Sometimes on this record, yeah. The shootcase would flip it backwards and they would overdub live over the backward backing track that they just recorded.
So look, there's quite a lot of material here, as we know, especially disc 2, that Holger apparently recorded secretly, what he himself called in-between recordings, where the band was either jamming loosely or warming up, or they're just recordings of parties or people yelling or a dog coming in, howling, stuff like that. He later took hundreds of hours of tape that he had recorded clandestinely and pieced it together to make this into a double album.
You know, it's a shame that modern day, you know, neuroscience pharmacology would just wipe out any of this stuff. You know, like anybody who exhibited these types of behaviors would just be like on enough pills to make them normal these days. Like you're not getting another Can. Any parent would be like, holy shit, this is what am I going to do? My kid is so goddamn weird. Get him on something.
Right, but then have the post-war bombed out childhoods to kind of have be a backdrop.
Yeah.
So I should point out that even the band was hesitant about making it a double album. And guys, our focus list, you may have noticed, is the first 4 tracks of the focus list that we're going to talk about would have been the main single disc, the first disc of the album. But the new manager they had from United Artists Germany, who ended up releasing this record, insisted on making it a double record and including another disc of wild experimentation. That's what we get on disc 2. And more or less, it worked. Tago Mago became their best-selling record. I couldn't get any official sales figures for it. I can't imagine it sold more than like 50,000 copies.
I mean, it probably sold more in the last like 5 years than it did when they came out.
Maybe, but it feels like I was reminded again of the Velvet Underground. It's one of those records that was much talked about, if not necessarily much purchased, or even much, more appreciated maybe than liked in some sense. But I remember with the first Velvet Underground record, they said the line is that all 30,000 people who bought it started their own band. And something like that is happening here as well.
I'm reminded of, I think this was from the Pavement episode, where they were talking about how they made their first EP and they had it out in the world. And the guy from Sonic Youth was talking about how he came about it. He said he walked into a record store and the guy was like, I got this new EP from this band called Pavement. It's basically unlistenable. And he was like, oh, that sounds great. I'd love that. Give that to me right now. There's just a market of people who are like, oh, it's horribly unlistenable. Yeah, that's my jam.
Yeah.
Feed me that shit.
If someone hates it, there must be something interesting going on. I can't say I totally disagree. Anyway, this also got them their first shows in the UK, where they quickly picked up fans like David Bowie, John Lydon, a.k.a. Johnny Rotten, who said Tago Mago changed his life. The UK press reviewed it relatively favorably, saying nothing else sounded like it, praising its experimentation in direct contrast to another record just released at the time by a British experimental outfit called Pink Floyd. That album, Metal, was called Unadventurous by comparison.
It's one of my favorite albums. I love that album.
This is in the British press. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I'll take Metal over this, but...
Oh, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to challenge that. I would take the first record of this and Echoed. I'd quite happily dump side one of Metal. I reckon much of that compared to this.
Oh, I love Fearless. Fearless is a great song. I like pop music. I'm one of those guys who's like, oh, it's borderline unlistenable. I'm going to listen to Mariah Carey instead.
I'd like to know why you have an album cover that looks like diarrhea smeared on a piece of paper, for like the US release, and then like a cool photo of the band for like the alternate.
I think of the official album covers with the brain splat. It kind of feels a bit like that is what they did. They took everything that was in their head, regardless, did not edit, and splattered it in a kind of blurted it out.
The cover that you showed us before we got on the call, that wasn't an original alternate.
That is the UK cover. The UK cover is this shot from behind the band with drummer and Damo Suzuki in profile with a crowd in front.
Yeah.
But the brain splat cover.
I thought of it as a guy vomiting, but yeah, yes, like big head spewing, which is kind of indicative of what's going on the tape.
What's going on with this thing?
Yeah. So just a few more beats here, and then we talk about some songs. So Can went on to make a few more records, including the follow-up, Egi Bamyasi, also on the 1001 list, which contains the closest thing they ever made to a radio single. It's a song called Spoon, which inspired an excellent 90s indie band to name themselves after it.
Radiohead played that song in concert a couple of occasions at cover versions. Some interesting bands really like that song.
I like how the cover is just the picture of a can of okra. It just says can on it.
Good.
They play it off Can quite a bit.
I like that.
Can continued to go through some personnel changes. Damo got himself a Jehovah's Witness girlfriend and renounced all drugs and weird art noise and quit the band. And then they went on for a little while, but then they eventually broke up in 1979.
Jehovah's Witness girlfriend.
That is the story of Can and Tago Mago. Shall we get to these, I'm going to call them songs?
Well, they're so short, and what are we even going to talk about in them? There's like,
The UK, they did have a top 30 hit in the UK in 1976 with a song that, Paul, this is going to blow your mind. It's called I Want More, and it is a disco song.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
They even appeared on Top of the Pops, which is like the cornerstone British chart show. And so I think being in that audience would be one of the great experiences seeing Can on Top of the Pops.
So that's probably when they got into drugs and like, all right, we need to make a little bit of money. Let's fucking do a disco song. Goddamn.
Yeah, I think that's when they put a red line to themselves. Yeah, the album was called Flow Motion, and honestly, there was a diminishing return on albums back then. But I still kind of like them because I kind of like how weird it is. But yeah, imagine can with a disco hit in the UK.
All right, let's play another clip. Somehow we'll find another clip of the opening track. It's called Paper House.
So yeah, 45 seconds in, you hear your first smash tape cut, where it's just like obvious. There's like a cymbal that starts crashing, and then it just stops, and there's a new part that comes right in over top of it, which I think is pretty funny.
with him.
This one does the hypnotic thing very well, though. They really do lock into a nice kind of hypnotic rhythm at about 2 minutes into the song. When most songs are like, let's wrap it up. They're like, no, we're just getting started. And they like lock into a nice rhythm. And I think it really moves.
Yeah, rhythm section really cool here. I was extremely optimistic the first time I put this on. In a way, I kind of came full circle on this because there are aspects of the story we just told that are a little bit of a turnoff for me. Some of them draw me in. I do ultimately think, as we've been alluding to, that this band has a sense of humor about itself, despite seemingly being these very straight-laced classical musicians. They have a little bit of a nihilism to them that I think allows them to see how silly some of this stuff is. But I will say that, like, right at the top, when I first put this on, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is powerful.
Yeah. This is one of the few times when you can actually make out some Damo Suzuki words. So up, down, think anything, what you feel is all gone. And it's worth just noting, which we didn't in the history, Rob, that he absolutely deliberately sang in gibberish. He made up his own language. He said it was kind of a mix between English, French, and German. You mentioned Stone Age, Marty. He even, in interviews much later, after his kind of Jehovah's Witness sojourn, he said, yeah, I had the language of the Stone Age in my mind. And he said, I don't want to sing anything because if you have any lyrics, then people label you. So I just made noise. And so, but this is one of the few times you can hear him actually sing. And then the next song, Mushroom, but here you can actually hear him articulate some thoughts, which is unusual for it.
And it's also almost the best of the three microphone setup as far as how well you can hear the different instruments in the mix. And my other comment is just in a time where no drummers even pretended to know how to tune their drums, the drums here are in tune and the drumming is just spot on. No click track, but it is very, very, very much like right on the nose tempo wise.
Yeah, it's very mechanical almost. Yeah. But I got to admit, I really kind of could not get over just how bad the singing was in general. He doesn't have a very good voice. And I know that's not what they're going for. I get it. I can appreciate that is what they are trying to do. But that's just not what I'm into, and I wanted something a little bit more to sink my teeth into. There's like no melodies ever in this band.
No, they eschew melody. The only person who I think has any melodic inclination is the guitar player, Michael Caroli, and he's the one who is kind of steeped in rock and roll. And even here, when his guitar starts to come in after they kind of hit a bit of a 4/4 beat, his guitar playing is kind of textured and melodic. I really like what he does in this song, but it's few and far between. It's not what they're about. And so I get it. I kind of wonder, though, would this band be anywhere near as remembered or lauded if they didn't have such a bonkers lead singer? I think it adds, not detracts most of the time, for me anyway.
No, I agree. But it is, reminiscent of like, I sat at the bus station with a fucking microphone and I recorded the meth heads having a breakdown and I put a beat behind it,
And that's what, it makes it a little odd, even in their own ethos, that they're all coming with this powerful musical training and then purposely sort of not deploying that, but yet you can hear it shine through. Whereas this guy wasn't a singer and doesn't really use the mic. Like, I think that would be my complaint. I understand why you want it to be improvisational chanting, gibberish. that sort of fits with my conception of what their ethos might be. But the idea that he's so, sometimes even when he's screaming, it sounds like he's barely on the mic. It kind of gets a little confusing at times. I would say he's the weakest part of the band. I do kind of agree with what you said, Stephen, that it probably wouldn't feel the same, wouldn't be thought of the same way. So I'm not really suggesting you can just pull him out.
Yeah. I mean, this band could be replaced with a number of different prog rock singers and be a prog rock band. I mean, the another timestamp is right around 150 where the drums go into this kind of tribal cowbell beat, and the whole thing is very, very proggy.
Yeah, you throw like John Anderson in there, and it would be cool. It'd be a completely different thing, though. And you're right, Stephen, it probably wouldn't be something that we'd be talking about. Yeah.
I mean, he's a cog in the machine. For me, the weakest of the cogs is the bass player most of the time. But I'm just hypnotized by Damo Suzuki. And if you watch some of the live recordings from that time when they played some studio recordings, and there's some really good, YouTube footage, and he's just hypnotic. It's bonkers.
I will agree with that. Yeah,
I love that. Which you don't see a lot anymore, like the naked front man, who's like, his job is half singer, but also like get the eyeballs on the stage.
He's got super long hair. He's shirtless. He's definitely striking.
Well, but that is an interesting approach because they're making something that is only going to be heard, but part of sort of the appeal is that is almost like a visual thing, right? Like they are bringing what probably worked very well at these parties at the castle to an experience of people who are never going to get to go to those parties at the castle. And so I can appreciate why he was a great frontman, but I don't necessarily think great frontman and great singer on your album are the same thing.
Yeah, I can't think of any krautrock band that had what you might traditionally call a good singer. It was completely eschewed by the genre in general. I mean, Kraftwerk just had robot intonation every so often. Just singing really wasn't. It was just part of the machines. Same with Asherah Temple. Same with Faust. They did. It wasn't a thing. I think they actively said, "Nah, too melodic. Don't like it. Stop." It reminds me too much of the things that we're trying to react against.
Yeah.
And so I think why he fitted into what they were trying to do. It shouldn't work, but somehow it kind of does.
I feel like what you said before about them rebelling against popular music being shitty covers of English language songs. I get it. I think they might have swung the pendulum a little too far in the other direction. There's a middle ground that they could have gotten to.
But as we laid out in the story, they are very actively trying to isolate people. They're aware of their effect on humans when this music gets played and when they do their thing. I think my complaint is probably a little more about the sonics, and I understand that was just a function of the equipment and that changes over time. But when you start comparing them to these other krautrock bands like Kraftwerk or Neu or the other ones that I've listened to anyway, the sonics kind of and I know they came a little later, so the recording technology advanced quite a bit, but they just sound more pristine in my mind.
Well, they sound studio as opposed to roomy. You can clearly hear that this is kind of a bouncy, flabby room, and that's definitely part of it. When you crank up the vinyl, you can hear weird echoes, and kind of is a bit annoying after when you're really kind of listening. But when it's loud enough, it doesn't bother me.
It's just kind of it sounds a little amateurish, and I think that is. I'm not even saying that I didn't enjoy this, and I'm not saying that I don't think that this is even essential listening. It's just that they're almost like forcing me to appreciate it because it has none of the hallmarks of anything that I appreciate when it comes to music.
Could you not lock into that groove?
No, I love the grooves. The grooves are great.
Yako's drumming on this song is fantastic.
Yeah, you don't need bass. You don't need bass in this situation.
And Marty, you probably understand this feeling more than me because I've never been a drummer, but I get this sense that he finds a groove, yet he's still chasing it. It's like,
yeah, Yeah.
And that propulsive sound, I can, even in my mind now, I'm replaying that song, almost like the beats drop and it still just drives. I just freaking love how it runs on.
Yeah, he's definitely locked in, and there are different kinds of drummers, and some are more expressive and some are more driven by the beat, and you could tell he's very much just in every tune on this album, just locked in and carrying the band, really.
But that is where I think, especially, you get a drummer who locks in. That is where, like, a bass player who also locks in just fills everything out so much more. So some of these songs felt a little thin to me, and Holger Zuke, not to talk too much shit on him, but like there's an upright bass on this album and it's not played by him. Like they're like, we're not going to go to you for that. We're going to actually go to, we're going to have Yaki play that because he's just a better musician than you. So,
well, interesting you say that, Tom, because later Holger Zuke gets replaced by a bass player, and he would admit that his skills didn't keep up with the band. So I think there is. But what he brings in terms of the splicing and the studio tech, I suppose that's where he left his mark on this band more than...
Which is one of the cooler things that the band does. Like, frankly, that stuff's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I got the sense that they didn't say this explicitly in the bio, but that he was probably a big part, in as much as there was no leader, in like deciding which takes were the right takes and helping to sequence the material and that kind of stuff. He seemed like he played a big part in that as well. Okay, let's move on to the next song on our focus list. This guy is called Mushroom.
So much of it was so much of it was so much of it. I was born, I was born, I was born, I was there. When so much of it was so much of it. When so much of it, I was born, I was there. I was born, I was there.
So my stupid tweet where I said there's only one drum beat and this is the one drum beat. There are different kind of slowed down and sped up versions of the same drum beat across their catalog. And to me, this is like the signature Can drum beat. I've tried to learn it. I can't replicate it. It's just a cool drum beat. And I get why it comes up a lot in their catalog.
Yeah, this is their tight pop song, their 4 minute song.
Well, I think they correctly call it quits after 4 minutes on this song. So it tells me something as a listener that they are exercising a certain amount of restraint and taste. It's almost like a reminder of that. I agree. The beat is really cool. And I give the sequencing here some credit too, because the songs do an interesting job of blending right into each other.
Yeah. No, definitely.
I like that part of it.
And, my fucking juvenile brain that makes up pornographic versions of lyrics for every song that I ever listened to. Like, I was definitely like mushroom head, like, that means a dick in the parlance of our times. But it took me an insanely long time to realize that they are talking about nuclear weapons and like the mushroom cloud explosion from a Japanese guy too. It's like,
it also kind of goes back to the album cover, which kind of looks like a mushroom cloud.
Yeah, when I saw Mushroom Head, I was born and I was dead. This is the one song I think I can hear Damo Suzuki really having a very clear writer's credit. It is part of his world.
I was born and I was dead is a great line. I agree. And since you mentioned the nuclear war piece, it kind of reminds me of the Sun Ra song, Nuclear War, since we're talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are you referencing that because one of the shitty jam bands I was in college would routinely do that song? And like 27-minute versions of it?
Oh, I don't remember that. I remember the first I heard of it was Yola Tengo doing a cover of it.
Ah.
And then I did eventually listen to some Sun Ra. But certainly Sun Ra is trafficking in some of the same avant-garde crazy. I don't remember hearing you do it ever, Tom.
Yeah.
Actually.
Oh, you'd already moved to San Francisco by that point. This is a General Electric.
Tom, you have to stop referring to every band you've been in as shitty. You've been in some good bands, man. Come on.
Oh, well, trust me. Some of them were good. This one was not one of them. This one was not one of them.
Yeah, with Suzuki, as this song progresses and he starts to scream when I saw the skies are red, and then it ends with what clearly sounds like a bomb going off, and then after a little bit what sounds like acid rain or something weird. It's quite extraordinary. When I turned 50 last year and I took the family to Japan, we went down to Hiroshima and I took everyone to the Peace Museum, which is a really confronting place, but oh my God, it's incredible. If you ever get the chance, just go and just think about what happened there. And I can completely hear some of what I saw in this song. I think that's why it's my favorite song on the album.
Another thing I was just now thinking about is a relation to like punk music and how punk music was supposed to be sort of like rebellious against all these kind of norms. But this is so much more. I mean, Rob always has his "Is It Punk" segment, but this is so punk in a way.
It's punk.
Yeah, it's what punk thinks it is, which is like punk is like, oh, we're like telling everybody to fuck off in very tightly packaged and easily marketable ways. Right. And these guys are like, trust me, you're gonna have to fight to like this shit. All right?
Yeah, and is that a violin or some kind of synthesizer that comes in around 2 minutes? There's a very stabby, intense texture that happens there.
I've always tried to figure that out.
Is that a farfisa? It might be a violin. Michael Caroli gets a violin credit on this album, so that might be a violin.
Yeah, that's why I thought it could be, yeah. They're doing that thing where they're purposely obscuring what instruments are which and trying their best to manipulate the sounds they have and stuff like that. So it is hard to tell.
Which must be fucking ridiculously hard when they essentially can do no mixing after the fact.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everything's printed. Everything is just like, hey, this all happened at the same time. So I can't turn any individual thing up or down. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, the drum sound is the sound, and then it's recaptured again when they overdub it. And that's what gives it that echo, I think.
Right. But because they did do some overdubs. Like that violin, if that is a violin, that may have been an overdub.
Yes.
It's true. But everything else would have already been on the tape. Okay, let's keep it rolling here to the next song on the first album, the last song on the first side, I reckon. It's called Oh Yeah.
I think the tape effect stuff is kind of particularly cool on this one. There's like a suck out reverse cymbal sound that keeps happening in the left ear that I thought was like particularly cool kind of towards the beginning of the song. And that kind of stuff was like, I don't know if a lot of people were doing that at the time, but it felt pretty belabored, right? Like this felt like somebody took a lot of source material and spent a shitload of time stitching it together and then realized that they couldn't make two different parts work. So they're like, let's just put another fucking bomb sound in the middle of the song and that'll help us stitch these two parts together.
You know, this is like the experimental song on side one that is a pleasure to listen to versus an experimental song on the second album, which is a chore. That's what it feels like to me. It's like what they do experimentally here is pleasurable and it kind of just completely draws me in. Whereas on the second album, sometimes it's deliberately meant to repulse you. There's something that they've done here that is really attractive and it just grabs me, this particular track. And this is the one where I really hear Kid A. You know, that little thing that you were saying, Tom, about how they would play with cymbal sounds, I really hear that in Kid A and I hear it here. This song is particularly influential, I suspect, compared to some of the others.
I wonder if they just did that all in a second overdub take with the vocals, because I know they played the entire track backwards and had Damo sing over it. That's why he has backward vocals. But I wonder if, like, Yaki's over there hitting cymbals or doing some other weird stuff. Or
there's weird sounds when you listen to it on really loud on vinyl. You can hear when a guitar comes in and it sounds odd, or when a bass just kind of clangs and then it disappears. I'm like, what happened there? So you can kind of hear what that is. And sometimes the tuning's just a bit bonkers. And so they clearly didn't give a shit about that. And they just were like, it's going to work. We'll put an explosion effect over the top and
a different drum beat, which I like. And I think this song has a good bass and drum combination where the bass is kind of playing just in lockstep with the drums.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, when they do that, I'm like, oh yeah, you're locked in, you're hypnotizing me. This works really well.
And you get Damo singing in Japanese on this as well. And so I dug up a translation, and this is one of the few songs where he deliberately calls out LSD, which is so that the drugs are there. They mightn't work, but they're there. And he talks about ghosts and rainbows and all kind of the weird things that you might think that Damo would talk about, except in Japanese.
You hear like half of the singing is backwards, and then part of it's in Japanese, and like it all kind of sounds the same to me. Like it's all equally unintelligible. There we go. But one thing I was thinking about, it literally just occurred to me, that the length of some of these song recording sessions that they were doing would involve bathroom breaks and shit like that. They couldn't have all constantly been playing for they're talking about like a 6-hour session that they were playing for. Like that's got to involve lots of downtime for various people in the band, like logistically. And there's no 6-hour long tape, so they had to have been like stopping and starting the tape and stuff. It's fucking bizarre. Such a weird way to make an album.
I don't remember pissing once when I was young.
There's a quote. That's the tagline of this episode. You know what? This one's 7 minutes long. Man, I could listen to this if it was 14 minutes long. I love this tune. I think there's something about this groove that's just really cool. I know Damo's being completely bonkers over the top, but this song works for me.
No, I like this one a lot as well.
Agree, yeah.
I think but it also sounds... Weirdly, it sounds more like the other stuff I've heard, which I think speaks to its influence. Like you said, this beat reminds me the most of the early King Gizzard material, for instance, which I've listened to a lot of. But your comment, I feel a little bit like that about the next song, Hallelujah.
This is like, you talk about funky. I mean, it's almost like a blues tune. It's like a bastardized blues song.
Yeah, it's funky as shit.
And it has that, Stephen, you mentioned Clyde Stubblefield. Like, Clyde Stubblefield plays a lot of ghost notes, which in drumming is kind of just a dynamic with the snare drum, where some notes you're playing real light and quietly and some you're playing more pronounced. He's playing like that kind of funk beat, but the ghost notes are just full fucking hits.
I think that's what makes it so propulsive.
Yeah.
It doesn't swing. It propels.
And for the audience, Clyde Stubblefield, right? He's known for being James Brown's drummer.
James Brown's drummer, yeah.
Yeah, the funky drummer.
Yeah, I just want to listen to Funky Drummer. That's all you need to know. You've got the snap and swing. It's 18 minutes, and there's a couple of bits where the drums dip out. But if you just hone in on the drums, you can hear that it changes. It's subtle, but it changes the volume. I don't know. It's a crazy piece of musicianship.
This is my favorite track. I feel like the rhythm section is working here, and to me, this is the track that I feel accomplishes most what the band was trying to do, which is it gets me to completely zone out, trance out, get lost in some of the stuff you were describing earlier, Stephen. Like every time I hear the song, it's kind of a different experience because my brain is just sort of Out in Outer Space. It's the best representation to me of why they're good. I like all the stuff on the first album, including this, which takes up the whole second album side. But yeah, to me, this really worked. And I'll be honest, I hadn't thought while I was listening that Holger was, as the bass player, was holding the group back. There's a bass groove that he hits at 4:15 that gave me serious stank face. But to count it against him, he almost immediately goes away from it right after that. He doesn't stand on it.
He sounds like very not confident in this song. And this is where I think the production technique is hurting them the most, because you can tell when he's being timid, his volume drops significantly. And then, when he kind of locks into something, he'll play a little harder and his volume comes up. And the stuff that he's playing when he's timid isn't bad. But for like a driving beat like this, you kind of need more omnipresent bass. And so he's kind of washing in and out of the mix a little bit. And so that's where a more experienced bass player or a guy who's like a session killer or something like that would just know to have the same attack the whole time,
What's weird to me is that I think there's a couple things that are strange about that comment. I hear what you're talking about. But one, it did sound like he was a pretty experienced bass player. And two, since he is the one who is effectively the engineer, he's listening back to the tapes, it feels like he would have the most potential knowledge of this kind of problem you're talking about. So what it makes me postulate, full speculation, would be that maybe he was having a hard time just focusing on the playing, because his head was thinking about edits and thinking about the take and thinking, all the stuff that frankly is quite normal for musicians. When you're trying to do recordings, when you're trying to get something done,
sure,
your head's kind of floating around. And the thing that we're saying sounds simple but is deceptively complex that the rest of the band is doing is full lock-in mode. Not their minds are blank except for what they're playing.
Even like in my recording experience, if I am playing a little timidly, maybe I'm worried about messing a part up or something like that, because it's recorded in isolation, the engineer just bumps that up a little bit and it all sounds normal, it just sounds even.
Sure, yeah, of course.
The fact that they worked with such limitations like they had, and they were able to come up with something that's still pretty compelling and kind of sounds fucking bizarre and fresh, that is pretty admirable, because this could not have been an easy feat to achieve.
There's a lot there. I wonder if he maybe heard that his bass wasn't quite what it could be, but there's nothing he could do about it. Because, he was stuck. I also, for a band that stretches time, it's so weird to me that about 4:45, this beautiful little piano break begins and it lasts 20 seconds. And then it's gone. And you never go back to it. But the band who did pick that up, and I don't know if anyone else is a Tribe Called Quest fan, but Lost Somebody, their track, samples that little piano break in the middle of...
Interesting.
That's amazing.
Every time the drum beat, because the drum beat actually completely kind of dissipates, and this piano just comes up, and I always go, oh yeah, let's go there. And then 20 seconds later, drum beat comes back in and off they go. I'm like, oh.
That's the problem. It was starting to sound good and commercial. I'm going to get rid of that right away.
Oh, they reacted. They're like, no, we're going to have another 14 minutes of groove. And
Damo, come scream something real quick. Come on.
Oh, he's quite restrained on this, isn't he?
He is. He's very restrained on this.
But the person who isn't is Ermin Schmidt. I mean, the last 5 or 6 minutes when he's doing keyboard sways, I'm like, all right, mate.
I called it a keyboard tornado. I thought that was pretty awesome, actually. And it would have made for an excellent album closer. I know it closes out the disc, but listen, we've been lathering praise on these artsy fartsy Germans, and we have to address the second disc of this. I really think they should have stuck to one disc, but let's talk about something from disc 2. It's called Peking O. Look, if the album was a single disc, I would have liked it much better. That's just where I'm landing on this. I think that it's not that there's nothing of value on the second disc, but it is a lot to take in. I picked this as the worst of the second disc, in my opinion. And, you know, in my future listing, I'll just say I will be stopping with those first 4 tracks we just covered.
This is what I imagine it sounds like to have a complete mental break from reality. Like, that's the vibe that I get from this song. It's 3 minutes into the song before you even get to anything approaching music. And that 3 minutes, they start to walk in the direction of music, but they don't get there for a while. It's fucking bizarre.
I like that they have an appearance of a drum machine. You know, you don't hear a lot of drum machines in this era.
Yeah. And supposedly there's some level of improvisation with the drum machine. And I don't exactly know what controls Yaki had on that thing, but it was noted in the biography that it might be the first example of improvising with the drum machine. Maybe he could only adjust tempo. I'm not 100% sure, but he was playing the thing.
So the rumor has it amongst Can fans that they bought the drum machine that day. So in the same way, they were like, all right, Damo, you're going to play with us tonight, or Michael, you're going to sing with us right now. They just plugged the drum machine in and started fucking around with it. And then it became a song on the album.
And we've talked about this in the past, but like, even modern day drum machines are pretty opaque in terms of like how to actually use them. Those old drum machines were like
just like a bunch of buttons, just like
yeah, it makes no sense. There's no intuition to it whatsoever.
They clearly had no idea what to do. They switched it on and then fiddled around with it, and then eventually it kind of disappears. But this track for me is full Damo. This is Damo in full nuts mode. I mean, he kind of babbles in places, he hiccups. He kind of laughs to himself at one point. He sounds like he's hurt himself at another point. It's the weirdest thing. And I suppose there's a certain cohort of people who kind of dig that. I must admit, I'm not one of them. My patience starts to run out after a bit. Side too. And I try, like, I'm a fan of this, and I try with these ones, but I kind of do think, what the hell? And apparently was it Irvin's wife, Hildegard, was a big push for this to be the second side as well. They really like the weirdness. And there are some people I know who absolutely love this album over the first. And I just go, you're completely wrong.
And perhaps I'm speculating a little bit, but perhaps there's some thinking, we've been joking about it, that first disc was them pushing into rock music too much, right? Losing their true avant-garde nature, and that they needed this as a balancing act. And I think it's an open question as to whether or not we'd still be talking about this record if it didn't have these pieces to it. It feels really excessive to me. I think you still could have gotten this avant-garde element in there somehow without making me listen to an entire album's worth of it.
That's why I call that, on side one, because you got You've got backward vocals, you've got the completely bonkers fiddly bit, you've got that avant-garde layer that doesn't swallow up the song, whereas here there is no song and all you've got is avant-garde. And if you're not into that, then it becomes a chore. And I kind of think the band realized that, because in the very last track, they give you a bit of a mellow out. They kind of let you smooth it out so you didn't finish with peaking O. But I mean, it's a tough listen.
It sounded like Demo was doing an auctioneer impression to me.
I don't know what they were doing. It's kind of like, I know Olger Shuke was he must have been having a bit of fun piecing all this together. But
you know, at some point, I got to admit, on this song, it started to feel almost like exploitative. I'm watching a crazy person and laughing at them or something like that. He's really going for it, and I don't know. It didn't feel good to me. Like, this song just didn't make me feel good when I listened to it. Some of the other songs, I'm like, oh, I can get it. He's being crazy. On this track, I was like, oh, he might actually be crazy. Like, I might actually be witnessing a crazy person. Okay.
Yeah, and that brain splurt of the cover, you know, it's everything that's in your brain, good and bad. And this is the chaotic, uncontrolled, metaphysical horror side of things that were reflective in the band, I suppose. I think you're right, Rob. They were like, oh, this is part of us. So it's got to be part of the record. And so,
but is that metaphysical horror enough to make it an essential listen? Now is the time on Sprockets when we vote. Let's send it around the room. Is Can's Tago Mago a must-listen album? I am going to send it first to Marty.
So this is not a perfect album, but to me, it is an essential album because it helps push out the outer boundaries, the expansiveness of music on the planet Earth. And so all day for me, it's a yes.
Excellent. Let's send it next to our very special guest, Steven.
Well, I think there's going to be quite a few listeners, I would think, who don't know this album. And hopefully we've persuaded some percentage of that cohort to enter into its world. And there will be some percentage of that cohort, again, who will think this is the most awesome thing I've ever heard. And I know people who've had that experience. And for that, I got to say yes, because I got to encourage. There will be a lot of people who listen to this once and never listen to it again and go, what the flock are they talking about? Yeah, so I see comments.
You didn't want to say my name directly.
For that other percentage where this will become part of their life, because it is one of those records, I gotta say yes. I'm with you, Marty.
Tom, what say you?
Yeah, I'm tempted to give it a yes, just so the cool kids stop yelling at me. I didn't hate listening to this album. I don't know if I'm one of those people who will never listen to it again, but I'm certainly not going to listen to it until I forget what it sounds like, and then I'll be like, maybe I should listen to this again. But that being said, I did hear a lot of music that I came to like later in this music. Like, I love Pavement, which is odd for me. I know it's odd that I love Pavement, but I do love Pavement, and I heard a lot of where Pavement got some of their ideas from. I agree on the Radiohead thing, and you're right. This is unique. This is weird. This is kind of edgy. To paraphrase something, Patton Oswalt said back in the day, some people think they're edgy. Can fucking has a summer house on the edge where they live year round. Like, they're fucking edgy.
But wait, Patton Oswalt said that about Can? I hope you're not serious.
No, he said that about like another comic where he's like, I thought I was edgy and then I listened to this guy. But yeah, so fucking yes. I'm going to give it a yes. Also, I just said yes to Billy Joel, so I feel like if I didn't say yes to this, all my credibility would be gone.
Did you? I haven't heard that yet. You just given away a secret.
Oh, sorry.
Tom expressing his artsy side, and after so much conflict on the Billy Joel episode, I'm impressed. I'm surprised Tom liked it as much as he did, to be honest with you. So I think this reflects growth, Tom.
I'm a sucker for a good rhythm section, so
This is Rob here, and I'm going to make it a clean sweep. It's not even close for me. It's an absolute yes. That said, I 100% agree with everything that was said before. I see many people dismissing this out of hand or maybe actively loathing it, frankly. But I actually do think, as I believe we said earlier in the episode, that itself means something. It means there is something there. There is an energy to this that still resonates all these years later, 50 plus years later, and that's apart even from the influence. But it was a cool listen, in my opinion. I think you do absolutely have to listen to it once, even the terrible avant-garde disc, and then you don't have to listen to it again after that, as far as I'm concerned. But I'll definitely listen to the first disc again. So, Can, baby, you are on the list. Wunderbar, Can.
I was just thinking, you were talking about, you just put thought in my mind. Do you guys remember the movie Inception?
Yes, yeah.
There's the idea that you enter a lucid dream. And the more I think about this album, the more I think those words make sense to me with how this music sounds. And so, all right, I'll leave you with that.
I should have had Phil on this episode then, man. That guy's always talking about his fucking dreams. God damn it.
That is true. Phil would have been a good pick for this. Actually, Steven had specifically requested to see if we could get Adam on this show because I think he really wanted to freak out resident youth pastor.
Oh, yeah, that would have been, yeah.
I can tell you now, I was fully planning to superimpose Adam's face on the cover because I think that would have been a perfect representation of how his brain would have exploded.
I'll promise you this. I'll request anyway that Adam listen to this episode, which I think is an easy ask, and then I'll get his response on a future episode for you. But yes,
oh man, this episode's as long as a Can song. We're gonna have to give him
put you in a trance, baby. Okay, well, that has been another great vote. Before we get to the mailbag and our homework for next week, I just want to give a huge thank you to Stephen McNulty for coming back on the show. Join up to Shortcuts Record Club. You get vinyl lists, you get special offers, you get competitions, you get community. Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love it. Thank you, guys. I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Stephen, not to toot my own horn here, but I think that the last episode that you were on, the Pogues episode, which I hosted, I think I'll go out and say I think that was our best episode that we've done yet. So
that was one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, wow.
You brought in context on that episode that I don't think any other guest would have been able to. And I think that's what made it so good for me as a listener.
Oh, wow. I appreciate it.
Agreed. And that's why we had you back, and that's why we want to have you back yet again. Maybe when we cover an Aussie record next time, perhaps. Speaking of which, we have our mailbag here. I'm going to keep the mic with me. And as it happens, we have a letter from Australia right now. This is David from Australia writing, "Hey guys, love the Meatloaf episode. I didn't agree with everything you mentioned, but still a great episode. My dad had 2 car tapes I distinctly remember as a kid. One was The Jazz Singer by Neil Diamond. The other one was Bat Out of Hell."
Fucking child abuse.
What a childhood. He's wanting to comment on the fact that in the Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell episode, we mentioned that Bat Out of Hell is 26 times platinum in Australia. And he confirms that that is, in fact, true and gives us some more context and by the numbers on that. So platinum sales in Australia is 70,000 copies. Now, we in Australia are a nation of 27.2 million people. Since the album's release in January 1978, it has sold 1.82 million copies. Now, based on the 2021 census, we have just under 11 million households, which means that over 16% all Australian households own a copy of Bat Out of Hell.
Yeah, they all definitely held on to that. But they're passing them down like heirlooms.
Don't visit a Goodwill store in Australia. You might not find one.
They're everywhere. In fact, you wouldn't. It's not unusual to see Jazz Singer Neil Diamond and Bat Out of Hell on the Goodwill store shelf side by side.
In the 50-cent bin? Yeah.
Of course, yeah. He says, "I own a copy. My parents are on their second copy. Their original tape died in the car thanks to the harsh Australian sun." And the other thing he wanted to do, speaking of Australian music, was a while back we put out a call for listeners from other countries to give us their playlists of music from their country. So we have an Australian super playlist made by listener David. He says, "I'm a huge supporter of our homegrown talent. This playlist covers quite a lot, every genre and style available. It's not complete by any means, but here it is. We're going to link it in the show notes if you want to get your dose of Australian music."
Awesome. I always love those. Those are fantastic whenever listeners send those in. We really love that.
Well, you're in for a treat then, Tom, because in a similar vein, we have listener Damir writing in from Sweden. And he says, hey guys, just want to chime in about those 2 previous playlists of Swedish songs that some of my fellow Swedish listeners created for you. So again, we're already getting feedback on the playlists that our listeners created that we put in the show notes. So get on the train, guys. Damir says, I'm not sure how those playlists were positioned to you, whether they were advertised as personal favorites, I believe they were, or something that would be representative of Swedish music for you to discover. But if it's the latter, I can categorically say that they completely failed. He's sticking with the complaining theme of our show. I have heard of literally 0 of the songs on either playlist, and I'll bet an arm and a leg that if I were to go out in the street of Stockholm right now and show the playlist to 100 random strangers, 95% of the songs would be unknown to them. Now, I'm not commenting, he clarifies, on the quality of music in those playlists. I only wrote to make sure that you don't inadvertently think that those are typical or overly popular Swedish songs. So, naturally, I asked for his own version of a Swedish 101 kind of playlist, and he happily created that, and it is in the show notes. And he's right, I have heard of way more of these bands. His playlist has The Hives, it has First Aid Kit, who I've listened to. It has Ghost, who was kind of a big band this past year. So you can check that one out as well. We absolutely love it when you send us anything that's in your hearts or in your mind. Tell us what we got right. Tell us what we got wrong. Send us more awesome playlists from around the world. We will share them on the show. We're excited to listen to them ourselves and share them with you as listeners. And send it all over to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. We very much appreciate you for that. And the last thing on our list is to get our homework for next week. For that, I'm going to throw it over to Tom with the Albinator.
Thank you very much, Rob. I have the Albinator here. It has been standing in the corner screaming gibberish for about the last 6.5 hours. Let's see if we can get it to come on over and give us something.
That Albinator is always in the corner, Tom. What are you doing?
It's always in the corner. It's when he's a bad boy. I tell him to get in the corner, okay? We're going to bring him over and see if he'll spit out another album for us. So without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to... The band is Rocket from the Crypt, and the album is Scream, Dracula, Scream.
Ooh.
Probably similar to the Billy Joel episode we just did, right? Just like a lot of love songs, very calm.
Very similar. I don't know that much about this band, but I feel like there's a connection to Drive Like Jehu.
Okay.
So that should be interesting. I'm sure more punksters will be on to yell at us. Okay. Well, we're excited to dive into that. If nothing else, the songs will be a lot shorter, I think, than this week's songs. I'm just going to take a stab at it. I've never heard it. But listen along with us to Rocket from the Crypt, Scream, Dracula, Scream. You know, I like the name, so maybe I'm fingers crossed on this one. And join us back here next week. For everyone here at 1001 Album Complaints, I have been Rob.
I've been Tom.
I've been Marty.
And I'm Steven.
A boosh.